Great. So, just how many of you have been to chapters before? So, no. So not many, right? So, we get like a lot of people on the live stream, and we get kind of different crowds all the time. So, I wanted to like introduce what it is. So, can you flip back to the?
Yep.
Okay. So, anyone can be involved in web standards in theory. Like it's been that way for a long time, but if you actually try, first of all, not everybody knows that they can be, and if you actually try, it can be overwhelming because there's, oh my god, so many standards and so many things that are being discussed by so many people all the time. And it can be intimidating because if you're not already involved, for a lot of us, we think like these web standards are created by gods high up on a hill somewhere. They're discussing these deep things, and you know, for you to weigh in, it's a little bit scary sometimes. You want to ask a question, you're afraid somebody's going to bite you. Even if you do get involved, though, you can't go to the meetings. So you always deal with like this partial, not quite really involved, and it is a long-term commitment. Developers, their day-to-day cycles of how we deal with things, they move on a completely different scale than standards. A lot of things that are coming out in CSS now that we're like finally able to use are 15 to 20 years in the making. So when's the last time somebody sent you an invitation or a request for a feature and said, give it to me in the next 15 to 20 years, we'll be good? This doesn't happen, right? So after a while, if you do this, you can ask yourself, like, wait, why am I doing this again? Because if I stop and think about it, like, isn't my job really to get something done, and standards are there to help me get it done, right? And if they're not helping me, I'm just sinking a lot of time. So Adi Osmani, now at Google, wrote this on the jQuery blog in 2011. He said, the reality is that while many of us would like to see change due to time restrictions, lengthy formal processes, we're unable to participate in standards. It makes it difficult for web developers to have a voice, and the result is that frequently web standards really suck. And so the JS Foundation is looked, and we want to represent these people. There's 5.6 million people just on Meetup that call themselves web developers, and we're tapping into none of that. So that's what Chapters is about. Chapters is about a way to pair with people who do meetups and standards people and a goal, and collect feedback, bring you things, talk about them, and champion voices with actual data about what developers really think. And to try and reduce the intimidation, make it essentially free, something you can go do one evening, once a month, watch a stream online, ask some questions. We'll skip that. So we want it to be more like this than the glacier and the being put on hold forever, right? We want a developer to say, hey, I'd like to know about this, and somebody to actually help you get the answers that you need. And it works best when we bring you things that you can actually use that like closely approximate that, so that you can actually take it and try to use it. That can't always be the case. So we've discussed at previous chapters custom elements, JSON LD, HTTP2 and beyond, general CSS next, heading element, document outline, element queries, media queries level 4 and 5, and what's next, we don't know. We kind of need your all's input. What do you want to hear about? What are you interested in? So we won't take any more time on this. So this week's talk is about web payments, and I'm going to introduce Marcos from Mozilla, who's a spec author. He's chair of the Web Incubator Community Group, who's also co-chair, who's also tasked with this kind of similar idea of how do we get more developers involved with ideas earlier and like weigh them out. see what works and what doesn't. And he's also, well, I'll let him introduce the rest of himself. So.
Yeah, all right, thank you. Thanks, Brian. So yeah, I'm part of Mozilla's DOM team. Just getting things ready so I can reshare my screen here. Yeah, so I've been doing standards for like about 11 odd years, maybe 12 years or something. So yeah, it's been a while. And as Brian said, this stuff takes a long time for a number of reasons. And we'll look at some of that. This talk is really about that and about how that journey actually works. So what I'm going to be talking about is web payments. So let me switch over to my slides. So can you see the slides?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So, so that was a nice kind of lead in there. I guess when you talk about standards, you're really talking about kind of, this whole holistic view of like, how do we build the web platform, something that's supposed to cater for, billions of people and enable all these kind of new and amazing experiences. So the primary focus always is on this talk is around payments. So we've been kind of buying and selling stuff as human beings for, millennia. So we kind of know the basic bits that go into doing transactions with each other, and more recently doing transactions across the world using, electronic means. So this kind of e-commerce-y thing that you might have heard of. So I know it's very 90s, but so looking at the web and where we've come so far, we've only really enabled like web, or the web has enabled commerce really, since we got TLS, so HTTPS, and back in the mid-90s. So I think that's when like the green lock icons kind of started appearing in web browsers. And since then we've kind of like worked out like, okay, these are the kind of bits that we need. So companies that have obviously like pioneered that were companies like Amazon and eBay and so on. So let's look at like where we've been. And what I found interesting as I was doing this talk is like, even though it's like kind of reflecting on the past is really like now. So we're really like, we're doing this transition at the moment, as I'll show you. But in the meantime, we have all this legacy technology that we rely on, particularly like HTML forms, right? So forms like, I think were introduced in, what's like HTML3 or something like that. So like, this was again, late 90s. And they basically provide quite a few really powerful features. So for instance, with forms, as we've all used forms, so we know these things. I'm not going to like spend a lot of time on them, but it's important to reflect on what forms provide. So the input types of like checkboxes, text, obviously a really powerful one. Now we're seeing things like date controls coming in. We've even made attempts to do like colors. And then there's a whole bunch of custom ones that people have created as well. So another really powerful feature is validation. In HTML5, we added validation of forms. So you could say like, is this a valid email? And it will tell you yes or no. They're fairly accessible as well. So if you lay out a form, you can tab through it, and also because you're given a HTML structure, which is like the form element, for visually impaired users and other users that depend on accessible technologies, they can access those forms. So the drawback being, particularly as we move into the mobile age, is that it can be really annoying to fill out forms, particularly on mobile, as we all know. So having to enter the same information over and over again can be quite tedious. So as a response to that, and also as part of HTML5, what was introduced in browsers was this idea of autocomplete. So given, you could say autocomplete equals true, the browser could guess like try to guess what to put into this form field. It may have been from previous information that the browser had, or we got a little bit more sophisticated where you could say, for instance, this is a credit card number, so CC-number. And that hinted to the browser, hey, this is actually like for a credit card field. You could do the same for the person's name and so on. So, so when I said like this is 2007, in Nightly, we've just released, or we're just experimenting now in Firefox with autofill. Even though like if you're using Safari, for instance, you may have seen it already, and I know Chrome has it as well. And I think probably Edge has it as well. So the basic idea with the form, like with the HTML form, is that you would post it somewhere. So you essentially, to do, like for instance, to do a purchase or, essentially to do like a purchase of a thing, you would post it to a server. There would be some magic credit card processing, and that would either succeed or fail. Now, here's autofill in action. So this asks, so Firefox telling you, yes, I can autofill stuff for you. And as you'll see on the animation, basically you can have different profiles for different addresses, and that stuff gets filled. So that's a huge step forward, right? So this doesn't seem like much, but again, this is something that requires a lot of heuristics and requires quite a lot of infrastructure in the back end to keep kind of, but just basically to remember, like, what things you've typed and what should go where, and then how to actually manage, what are your addresses. So an interesting thing that this ends up solving is this whole idea of having like a contacts database inside the browser that relates to you. So I know this is not like super exciting, but that was kind of like where we're at, or that is where we're at, like, or where the web is at today with regards to like filling out forms and helping you fill out forms. So this is fine. So for those of us who have been using or have been looking at the native app space, it turns out like, we're a little bit behind. So let's talk more about the present, and let's put this like where the web is at with relations to form filling and with relation to payments in context. So remember, I can't see you, like, because I'm looking at the slide. So if you have any questions, just shout it out. If anything's not clear, just shout it out. So while we were doing forms and whatever, clever people working on proprietary payment methods were building quite interesting or innovative technologies or ways of solving the payment problem. And particularly, Apple Pay came along and really like blew things out of the water, particularly when it comes to web integration. So I don't know if you've seen how, or many of you have seen how Apple Pay works, but it's really quite phenomenal. So you basically just have once you've registered your credit card information with Apple, which you probably already have done through iTunes. So they have like, I don't know, a squillion credit card numbers, basically. So all these people have registered already, and other people have iPhones. They're able to basically make use of the biometrics scanner on the iPhone to authorize payments directly from the web. So the experience that it provides is quite nice. And in addition, if you have like an Apple Watch, you can authorize payments and select the actual credit card that you want to use directly from your watch. So again, the experience that they provide is like, it's not just like form autofill, but it's like basically like one-click, fraud-proof, tokenized based payments that like basically solve like a ton of problems, or at least a ton of security problems, and a whole bunch of privacy problems as well. Excuse me. I spent the last week recovering from the flu, so my voice may go a little bit because I'm still a tiny bit with the flu. Okay, so that was Apple Pay. So as a response for the web, notable exclusion here is again Safari, even though they are part of this effort as well. they're currently not committed to implementing this API that I'm about to show you. So what the web responded with, or the community, the web community responded with this payment request API. So right now, it's shipping in Chrome. It's in Edge 15, which has been rolled out. I don't know, Microsoft's kind of rollouts are a little bit tricky. So like some computers are like kind of stuck on like Edge 14. I just managed to upgrade to Edge 15. We're currently implementing in Firefox. We haven't shipped yet. We're hoping to ship later this year, but my rough estimate, or my gut estimate, is like sometime next year we'll have it out. And it's also, I believe, in Opera Mobile as well. So I think they're using a Chrome implementation, but I've done the wrong payment sheet. And it's also in Samsung's browser as well, which I didn't include here because I was too lazy to go and get an icon. So sorry, friends at Samsung. So hopefully this will play at an okay rate. So I'm just going to show you how it works in Chrome. So essentially, you can go and to pay for something, and it will bring up a little payment sheet, and then you can basically just select the address directly from the browser, and you can also like select the credit card you want to pay with. And all you need to put in is the CCV, and essentially then just sends the data to the website verifies it, and a payment is done. So you can see in 25 seconds that video played, essentially a payment was made, or enough information was provided that a payment could be made. So that takes basically a lot of the pain out of development. Or at least if you're a merchant or you have a website that sells things, it takes a little of that pain of like trying to gather this data because you don't need to deal with forms. Here's an example of the thing that we're working on. Again, this UI is a concept UI. It's something that we're prototyping at the moment. It's not something that we're shipping. But again, it gives you an idea of how this payment request API will work. So essentially you have things like being able to select shipping options, displaying the total, being able to manage and add addresses to where you want to ship to. You're also able to control billing, store different credit cards, and so on. So, okay, so let's dive into some of the details here. So I know some of you won't be developers. So Brian told me that there's usually a mix of people. So I'm not gonna like do a super deep dive into the API itself. I will show you aspects of the API, but I want to talk about kind of like, what problems the API sets out to solve and how it solves those problems, and how we think about the different parts that go to make up a payment or a request for payment, basically. So for those who are, inclined to code things up with JS, hopefully this will also give you an idea of how you might be able to use this. And if you're more into the UI side or UX side, hopefully this will inspire you to think about, okay, how can I make my shopping experience or experience where people buy stuff integrate neatly into this or into what this API provides. So actually I'll go back for a second. So when we talk about payments, there's three parts. As the bullet points there mentioned, there's basically the methods, and that's basically how you pay for things. So that includes like things like credit cards, and I'll talk about other newer payment methods as we look forward as well. So that includes things like Bitcoin and other tokenized payment methods. The details are essentially what's being bought. So like, I'm buying like three teddy bears and whatever. So those are basically a summary of the things that you're actually going to buy. And then options are things that you actually need to complete the transaction. So if you're buying a physical good, you're going to need a physical address to send those things to. Okay, so payment methods, as I mentioned, payment method quite interesting because it's not just like credit cards or debit cards, but it's also like if I have a shop, I might say like, look, I have a deal with MasterCard and Visa. They're the ones that do my payment processing, but American Express, as everyone knows, like American Express has like higher fees. So some merchants don't accept American Express. So you need to actually be able to express that when you actually like make a request for payment. So when you actually ask the user, hey, you want to pay for this? This is the methods that I support. And the browser can come in and say, automatically even say like, okay, the user doesn't have those things, so I'm not going to allow the payment to go through. Or so then you need to like knock it back to the site, or you can actually like display the like things that match and say, look, you have a MasterCard, and MasterCard is your preferred card, so that's probably the one you want to use. So it allows us to make basically intelligent decisions there while providing a rich user experience. And also giving the user choice as to like which payment method they use. Payment details, as I said, was basically like what's being purchased. What this allows us to do is like say that this is order, for instance. So I basically identify what it purchases. So we might say this is order number 554 or 455 or whatever. So we might say like an invoice number or something like that. So we can basically group these things together. The display items are, like I said, things that you might you're making a purchase for. So for privacy reasons, we don't send this information along anywhere. So this is usually just contained within the browser and just allows the user to look at this information. So this is essential because like, imagine if like, as you're shopping on the web, if like, credit card companies or other people were able to get hold of this information, they could basically start gathering like big lists of like what are people's buying habits and things like that. And we obviously don't want that to happen. So that's things like, loyalty programs are there that you opt into to actually do that, but we want to kind of prevent that from happening at the same time. So this is usually information that we don't pass along to anybody. And total, as you saw from previous screenshots, is basically the total that will be displayed to the user. Now, the API, I need to point out that we don't actually do any math here. All the math has to be done by you, the developer. So basically, you need to keep track of like, okay, if you're buying these items and there's going to be shipping involved, this is what the total is going to be. We just kind of dumbly display it to the user. As I mentioned, if you're buying physical goods, you can have shipping options, and basically you can just list like what they are and how much they cost. So, here's just a simple example, like ground shipping and drone shipping, and you can put different values on those. And as the user selects these particular like shipping options, again, there's a little bit of a chicken and egg problem. So imagine like I'm in Australia and I go to Amazon.com. So if you've never left the US, you might have not experienced this like shopping at Amazon, but there's a lot of things that at Amazon.com that don't ship to Australia for whatever reason. So this might be books, or it might be like physical goods. Like imagine if I wanted to buy a refrigerator. So obviously a refrigerator is something you can potentially ship to Australia, but it might just be not cost effective to do that for a merchant. So I might be sending it as a gift or something like that. So when the address changes, there's actually an event that occurs, and you can actually check like, okay, can I actually ship this there? Or if a shipping option changes, you can also detect that and actually react to it. So this code basically just shows that you can basically respond to shipping address changes. Because it may turn out that you can't actually ship something, or it might turn out that like, oh, actually you don't live in the city itself, you actually live outside the city, so it costs $5 more to actually ship there, and so on. So basically, the API allows us to model these kinds of problems as well. Another like really interesting problem that the API allows us to model is this problem like, if I'm paying with an MX, you can pay with MX, but MX will usually like attract a larger fee. So basically, you can model that problem too, where you can say things like, if you use your Visa credit card and it's like let's say again, let's use Amazon. So we say if you use an Amazon Visa credit card, you'll get a free mug. You can also like basically model that problem as well. So it gives like a whole range of different options that capture basically common problems with buying stuff, both in the physical world and also online. So lastly is the payment options, which I said is the things you needed to complete an actual payment. So for instance, for a physical good, you may request, like you can say request shipping is true, but it may turn out that you don't need, for that reason, you might not need the person's email. Usually you probably do need the email because you want to send the invoice, but maybe not. Maybe you already have it because they're like a previous customer, so maybe you just don't need their email because you already have it or something like that. Same with the name, and you might not need the telephone number at all. So this gives you control over what you actually need to complete the payment transaction. So even though you request these things, it's up to the user to actually provide you this information. So once you've negotiated, these are the options, these are the payment methods, these are the credit cards you can use, these are the bits of information that I need from you, these are the things that you're actually buying, this is how much it's going to cost. Eventually what you'll get back is what's called the payment response. So you've made a request, and now you'll get back a payment response. So that response, I'm not going to go into the details of this code here, but essentially what you can do with that response is you can actually check that you got what you needed. You can validate it. What's nice about the API is that you can basically pull out the bits that you need, and it's all JSON stringified for you, so you can easily send it up to the server. And if things go well and everything validates, you can basically say response.complete, and you can say this is successful, and otherwise you can fail. And what that tells the browser is, or what you literally see in the browser is done, and a little check mark or some little song and dance. So each browser will do something different here, but essentially you'll get a big check mark or an X or whatever. So again, this is up to the browser vendors to provide a nice experience here. So that's essentially the flow. So that's basically where we're at with payment requests. So that's the present. So now we can talk a little bit about the future. So as I said before, it's actually the present that's here at the moment, but it's not evenly distributed. And also a little bit of the future as well. So I'm sure you've all heard of Bitcoin. And as I showed you a little bit as well with Apple Pay. Apple Pay is not obviously Bitcoin, but it is it's a new way of paying for things that's much more secure than using credit cards. So there's a whole bunch of technical and security properties that I'm not going to go into too much detail, but essentially these are kind of tokenized based systems where there's credit card that you've given to somebody that's securely stored, and then you don't actually ever need to go and touch that credit card itself. All the transactions and all the interactions that occur with that money are all represented by secure tokens. So you can do a whole bunch of really interesting things based on these kind of tokenized systems. Excuse me. So another part of this, looking into the future, is that we have all these people that are providing these fantastic experiences like Shopify, we know like old school ones like PayPal as well, who provide like if you've used eBay for instance, or like I'm sure you've paid for a bunch of things with PayPal before. Amazon's like one-click shopping experience as well. Anyway, there's like a ton of proprietary payment handlers, both ones that are like native apps, like on mobile phone, like you can go to like, I'm sure you even have your own banking, like your own bank's native app on your phone, in addition to ones you would have used online. So basically we have like, this collection of payment handlers that are out there, both on the web and both on like native apps, and it would be great if we could tap into those as well. So Google's currently working on this, which is a way of integrating native applications as payment handlers directly through the web, which essentially like with Android, you can just hook into by saying like, for instance, the example here is Alipay. You can essentially just give the URL and match on that. So you can see, you won't be able to see it, it's very small, but it's basically like org.chromium.default payment method name. And then it's HTTPS www.alipay.com webpage. So that links together this, like says like Alipay, this website, has a native app that allows you to pay for things. And you can basically just use it out of the box and integrate it into the payment experience. So it becomes a new payment handler. So a thing that handles payments for you. And like I said, there's things like eBay, like PayPal that are on the web. So it would be fantastic if we could also integrate those as well. So the idea is, that I've mentioned slightly here, is this idea of having like ways of identifying payment methods. So for instance, android.com/pay as a way of like saying, this is an authoritative payment, a thing that can provide payments. And also these standardized ones where we, like the W3 or the community of the W3C, we all get agreement on like, for like Bitcoin and other like coin or tokenized based things, you can say like, I'm a merchant and I support tokenized payment systems like Bitcoin. So we can basically just give a little like string, like well-known string, and we can say like, I don't care who gives me this token, but I just need this token from somebody, and I can verify it against this ledger, and then like I can verify that I'll be paid. And then on the other side is this whole idea of this web manifest, which I don't know if you've heard of or not. Hopefully you've heard of progressive web apps, which are installable web apps. They rely on technology, well, they rely on a whole bunch of technologies, but two key technologies are web manifest and service workers, which I'm sure hopefully you've heard of as well. But web manifest basically allows you to associate a name and a set of icons with a web application. So by bringing together like the application's name and icons, you can basically like create an installable experience. And on top of that, you can then say, hey, by the way, this application is able to handle payments. So as long as, again, so it meets all the criteria that a progressive web app needs to meet. So it needs to be secure, it needs to work offline, and so on. In addition to that, it can request a special permission, which is like, I can handle payments for you if you want me to of this particular type. So that brings us to essentially payment handlers. So the things that I've been talking about are all represented here. And this brings together basically, the past, the present, and the future, where we have payment methods like credit cards, but we can also have native apps that service payment handlers, and we also have web apps that can service payment handlers. So it basically covers the broad spectrum. And in addition to that, we have autofill as a backup for where you just have like forms, or like if I don't have any Bitcoin, I can still buy stuff because I can still fall back to the old methods. And essentially, like when I'm using something like, for instance, like Android Pay, Android Pay can happen in a proprietary payment processor, like, in the browser can actually do that and just get me back a token if I am a merchant. So it basically like takes away all like the pain of like having to like have a payment processor. All I need is basically like the bits that I need to complete a purchase, and the browser can basically handle all that, while allowing us to have this completely distributed basically payment infrastructure where we can do like a whole bunch of interesting things. Here's a little example of like how this would work. So the way that you should be thinking about this, like, you as like average person can now go and like potentially go and create a website, which is like a really nice wallet. You can just set up your own like wallet.com, and you can manage people's credit cards. I don't recommend you do this without having like, I come up with what's called a PCI certification, which basically means you're like authorized to deal with credit card data, but in theory you could do this. So you set up wallet.com using this payment handler API that we're currently working on. You can basically ask for the permission to handle the people's payments, and you register yourself, and then in theory you could manage credit cards, and you can provide a really nice experience, and potentially a much nicer experience than even the browser can provide. So again, that's what a lot of people are doing. So Alipay provides a really nice experience. It's very tailored for that particular market, and for the so for instance, the way that commerce is done in China. So they handle that quite nicely and probably much better than, or doing a better job than probably Google can do there. So again, how this works under the hood is that there's a service worker that will actually, like when a payment request is made, wallet.com service worker wakes up, it's the one that actually like handles the transaction by also spinning up a page that actually gets displayed. So what this will actually look like, this is all theoretical at the moment. But it's partly theoretical because Chrome is actually like shipping this, or a prototype implementation of this at the moment. But the idea is basically that you would have a service worker. That service worker is able to receive the request for payments. It can actually do the communication it needs to do to actually like perform the transactions, or actually display something to the user, which the user can then like select a credit card or or so on. And from there, it can give back the information. So in this example, I'm using Etsy.com. So Etsy never needs to know that it's actually talking to wallet.com. All it needs to know is like, I need a credit card number. I don't care where the credit card comes from. Just like, and then wallet.com can go, hey, I know I have credit cards for you, and it can just give like a credit card to Etsy.com. But the two never need to know about each other. So wallet.com will know that it's Etsy that's making their payment, but it won't know what it's actually being bought or what's actually being purchased from Etsy. Only thing it'll know is like, okay, I see somebody wants to buy something from Etsy, so I'll just give the credit card number. So as I mentioned, Chrome is actually like working on this. They're actually collaborating with PayPal to see how this might actually work in practice. And at the same time, we're working on the spec as well. So that basically gives the summary of like, how all these technologies basically progressively enhance each other to actually provide web payments as an open payments ecosystem for the web. Bringing all the bits, like everything we've learned and everything that we have already on the web, will introduce new bits of critical infrastructure to actually enable all these new and exciting things to happen on the web, to enable like more commerce and open up these kind of payment ecosystems and new payment methods in a more decentralized way. So that's it. That's payments on the web.
So like, most important part of chapters is not just to get things in front of you, but to allow you to interact and ask questions in a kind of smaller environment. So does anybody have?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I'm a little new to this. But you mentioned standard or tokenized, I guess, payments. Maybe you could break down like really simple level what that means.
Sure. So I can again use Apple Pay. I'm just grabbing a drink because my throat is killing me. Let me put my screen back on. Oops, stop sharing. There we go. Okay, so again, so let's take Apple Pay so we can try to kind of understand how the tokenized thing works. So essentially, you give your credit card number to Apple, right? Through iTunes. So they store it, and they have this instrument now that represents you and some monetary amount. So if you want to make a purchase, like you want to buy this phone, for instance. So that phone costs, let's pretend it costs $100. What I can do is I can say, okay, I'm going to take like $100 from the credit card, and I'm going to like go and query like visa.com and say, okay, I want to like get $100 from this credit card, and Visa says yes, they have that money. So then you like basically take that, the representation of that payment, and you basically then like cryptographically sign it and turn it into a little token. It says like this amount from this credit card represents $100, and I can prove that because I signed it with my private key, and you can verify that. So then I can send it basically like to you, and then you can verify that by using a public key to like reverse it and actually verify that yes, this cryptographically comes out okay. So given a token, like imagine you're a merchant now, and you say, okay, somebody wanted to buy this phone with Apple Pay, and I got back a token. Now I can go as the merchant and say, hey, I have this token, and it claims to be for like $100. Hey, Apple, is that like true? And then Apple will say, yes, that is true. That actually represents $100, and you may take that $100 now and put it into your bank account, Mr. or Mrs. Merchant. So essentially, like, you know, that's an oversimplification of how it works, but essentially that's how you do it. So it's like small transactions and small amounts are basically bundled up into this small token thing. It's like, you know, like any token-based system, like, you know, like going to a theme park or anything like that, where you win tokens, where you have like physical tokens, and you can go and redeem them for things. They represent some kind of value in exchange for something else.
And now it sounds like right now is that
yep.
standardized, or is that really unique to the method and then the retailer?
So
like at what level is that like standard? Is this completely really unique, or is there any commonality? Like where does that lie?
They are they're emerging commonality. So there's like, for instance, Bitcoin as it's not really like a standard, but the way that it works is standard within that ecosystem. So people can send each other money with Bitcoin because there is the shared ledger, like out in cyberspace. There's like this kind of shared thing where you can actually go and check like you know, what transactions have taken place and how much money does this person have based on this finite resource, which is the number of Bitcoins that have been mined over time. So like that's all tracked and it's all verifiable through through basically, you've probably heard of the blockchain, right? So the blockchain basically is that large ledger which basically tracks all transactions that have taken place. And there's only so many finite resources that can actually be, or finite Bitcoin that can actually be in the system at any one time. So in terms of standardization, that's like basically what's happening now. So the blockchain is one way of doing that. And you have all these cryptocurrency like Dogecoin and like whatever coin, like all these coin things that have appeared. they basically all rely on the same thing, which is this semi-standardized way of, or mathematically standardized way of actually like verifying things.
Alright.
Then there's like the one that I talked about is the Apple model. So again, that relies very heavily on a bunch of like certificates and servers that you need to talk to. So you basically just need to talk to Apple servers to actually be able to like verify things. And you need to basically get a certificate from Apple to be a registered merchant, to be able to use Apple Pay. You obviously need to be a merchant that is recognized cryptographically with Apple. So they will actually give you a certificate that you put on your server, and that enables you to basically do the payments and also to verify tokens against their servers. So again, it's not like a standard, but it's a standard. It uses standardized technologies to basically do or verify payments. And again, other e-commerce things that have been around for years basically rely on very similar technologies as well. So in terms of like the newer tokenized things, the details are still being worked out. But those are essentially the options that are there. So when we will see actual like tokenized payment methods, it could be like in the next 5 to 10 years. So personally, I think like credit cards are not going away. Even within the community, the web payments community, there's people that are like very much about like tokenized payments, and then some of us that are like credit cards is where it's at. Because like the whole world runs on these freaking credit cards, right? And what you can do also is like generate credit cards that represent the actual amount. So you can basically have generate a credit card that only lasts like 5 minutes to perform some kind of payment for a very specific amount. So you can have these kind of virtual credit cards that you can actually like generate on a need, basically just like as on a need basis. If I just want to buy I want to buy this lemon and it's $3, I can generate a little credit card that just has $3 on it. So there are actually like companies and technologies that basically allow you to do that. So this is going to play out in interesting ways over the next like few years. So we'll see. I know that was a little bit of a rant, but like.
No. So I guess obviously the purpose of this is to simplify on the developer end the code they need to implement, and then also a more streamlined user interface. Like now, I get like Apple Pay seems very, very simple, easy to use. Obviously, as far as this being something that you can consistently implement on any website, like what is really, I saw some code up on the screen, but really about like what's the minimum amount of lines I'd realistically need to code right now to implement this, and then on the client end, like how few clicks can a user really go through to make this happen? Like how simple can this get?
So it's definitely not simple. So as I showed you, the payment flows are complicated by their nature because of all the different kind of exceptions that you have. Like, if I give you a credit card number, or I give you a number that could be like a debit card or a credit card or any like random thing, like it may be an Australian credit card number, you might not, or your bank might not be able to process that. And the thing that as a merchant, you need to have that relationship with a payment processor to actually like allow you to do that. So as a prerequisite, if you do have all that stuff in place already, then yes, then it's kind of like a lot easier, obviously. So basically, all you need is, like I said, like, okay, what credit cards do I support? And like, can I, from the things that are gathered into a shopping cart, and you don't even need a shopping cart, you can do like one-click buying. So I want to buy, like, I just want to buy this thing and just click on it. So you can basically do like a one-click payment request to allow you to buy a particular item. And that's actually like one of the ways that we recommend that you use the API. So instead of gathering things into a shopping cart, we actually just recommend like put together the method, the payment method, put together what's being bought with the total. And like if it's a physical good, just say like I need like the shipping address, and with those 3 little key bits of information, you can basically do the payment request, show the payment sheet, and allow the user just to pay with 1 click. So that does make the whole process easier, but it does get more complicated when you start like playing around with like shipping options and things like that. Like, can I ship to Australia? Can I ship to, I don't know, Mexico? Or can I even ship, you know, or where it even gets more fun, I know like in the United States, you have different like tax rules depending on what jurisdiction you're in, right? So like, I don't know, like taxation in California is obviously different to what it is in New York. In Australia, like it's all standard, so we don't have like that issue, but I know like, you know, that is an issue. Even like within states themselves, like different cities have like different taxation rules. So again, like the problems are like, they can be easy, but a lot of the really hard problems are actually just in like working out how you actually sell stuff. Like selling physical stuff or selling digital stuff. And whatever, like those rules are not like they're not technical problems, they're political problems, or they're like just general legal problems.
Okay. I guess to add to that, to someone that's interested in the technology but hasn't got a lot of experience, like I guess what third-party like application, like something I could plug in my website, you know, compared to like what third-party applications are out there now versus just using, you know, the browser, like what are the pros and cons of each?
So the pros of like using the browser potentially would be that you could get that information straight away. So you could like basically say, I want to buy this, like I need a credit card, or I need like an address, and you'll get it straight away. So that's a pro. A con is that the information might not be there, or it might not be complete, or that you won't get, obviously, like I said, the taxation problems or things like that. So something like, on the other hand, something like Shopify or PayPal, they have all that information, or even like Google Pay, right? So imagine again the example where you want to buy something from Australia, like currency conversion. So like coping with that as well would be a problem. So there you want to maybe like have Google handle the currency conversion for you. And if you have a Google merchant account, you know, you're like, look, I'm selling this thing, I'm in the US, and like people are gonna pay with Australian dollars. I don't want to deal with that. I just want to get paid. So that might be a thing where like Shopify or like Google Pay or whatever, or like, Android Pay or whatever, can just kind of handle those things for you. And that's again integration with native or integration through a website in the case of like PayPal, where PayPal just like takes away that pain. They probably know like also like based on like where the user is, like what they need to tax them, and they may handle all that as well for you. So ultimately, like I think what we'll see is that the key people that will actually like create experiences or payment experiences around using the payment request API will be, you know, like PayPal, Shopify, and these larger providers that can actually like handle a lot of the complexity that is needed to actually like allow payments to actually occur. Because as I mentioned, it's quite complicated. It's like a really complicated, not only like within a country, but within doing commerce across the world is actually quite complicated. Because of all the taxation and rules and, you know, and just like, you know, just even like, you know, limitation of the API right now is like around shipping. Like in China, they don't, like they have like, obviously like streets and street names, but they don't really have like street numbers that are like really set, and they're like, so even modeling those things is quite hard. And even, you know, in the US, you can say like, I'm at this block, but you can also like ask like UPS using a web service, you can say like, hey UPS, what's like the best place for like a user to pick this up from? And UPS will recommend you an address. Like if they can't find your address for whatever reason, like let's say you live on a farm or something like that, or like actually like we can't like deliver there, like UPS may recommend a place where somebody can go and pick something up from. So the API doesn't quite cope with that particular situation right now. So there is like this weird complexity there. So that's like, again, a balance that needs to be struck.
Okay, so then this is a technology that, you know, providers like Shopify, PayPal, like they'll potentially be users of this technology then? Like, you foresee them using this significantly? Or?
I think they will definitely be one of the primary users, and still like, I'm sure as we've seen like I think we'll see a lot of like middle to large size and medium size, and potentially even small size merchants also use it as well. So it may be like strategically, for instance, let's say you're a small merchant, so not quite like an Etsy, but like a smaller, let's say a more boutique Etsy. You could, for instance, you could gather the shipping address first to work out like where the user is, and then only request the credit card details from them. So things like that would allow you to basically mitigate some of the things. But basically what you're trying to do, ultimately, is not like, you know, it's basically trying to reduce the friction to buying stuff, or to allowing stuff or goods and services to be exchanged or purchased. So basically, like, if you have their address already, or you have their credit card already, or whatever bit of information you need, it's basically like, if you're using the API, it just takes away some of that typing. So the idea is that like you want to take away the user having to type stuff, or like, you know, like type it on their phone. So if you're like kind of sure that they might have it already, like the credit card number, it might be easier just to call into the API, and the API can just provide you the credit card number.
Okay, I guess.
And the same with the address.
Running in that vein, something that, like a significant advantage of this would be the ability to easily purchase over the phone or on mobile.
Yeah.
I know from Zoe, are they like is what you're developing right now solely for web and you're transitioning it, or are you really approaching like a mobile and web, or what's the case?
It's both mobile and desktop. So Firefox's primary focus is on desktop, but Google's primary focus has been on mobile, but they've just brought it to desktop as well. Is that what you were asking?
The API be common across either platform, correct?
Yes, yep.
That's all I want.
Yep, so it's across both. And we're looking in Mozilla and Firefox to bring it to mobile using Android Pay as well. So integrating into Android Pay as well.
All right.
Anybody else have?
I see questions on Slack from the live chat.
Do you have questions on Slack? Can you bring it?
Yeah. Well, several people want to know if the slides are available. So, is there a convenient URL for those?
Can you share the slides
I can
URL?
definitely share them.
And then,
So if you share them with me, I'll post them on the meetup page.
Yep, I will definitely do that.
You could just tweet them too. We can retweet them.
and then, someone asked, Y3N3RRR asked on Twitch, which layer should security be built on, the transport or message layer? How do you encrypt credentials or credit card info?
Did you hear that or no?
I heard a little bit. Can you repeat it again?
Yeah.
I heard sorry, just repeat it again.
I think there's a typo and it makes it a little bit difficult. So, which layer should security be built on, the transport or message layer, and how do you encrypt credentials or credit card info?
It's the same, it's the same. So you don't need to you shouldn't be storing. So let me go back a bit. We store the credit card information inside the browser obviously securely. So we use the same mechanisms that we use to protect passwords. So credit card information and also just general user information, that's all protected. So obviously when we hand it over to you as the merchant, all the general obviously the API, so the API actually won't work in HTTP context by design. So it's actually if you look at the spec, all of it is tagged as secure context only, which really just means this is not available in HTTP. Already you need to be in a TLS HTTPS environment to actually be able to use the API. So that's one security assurance that you get. And then to handle credit card information as a merchant, you'll need essentially some kind of certification or approval from the credit card companies to actually be able to do that, or you'll need some kind of relationship with a bank that will actually provide you with some secure component or secure URL that you can actually make payments to and verify things from. So the API itself doesn't add anything to that, because the API, if you look at it, all it does is it's a dumb thing that just gives you back data. So you just request data and you'll get back the data that you asked for. So like I said, you'll get back a credit card number, or you'll get back a token, or you'll get back a shipping address or a billing address, but that's it. That's all that it provides. So there's nothing really clever or secure about the API itself. For the more cleverer ones, so let's say that you had a payment handle like Bitcoin, that would be running inside an Android application, a native Android application. Those applications, again, they're outside the browser, so they're really outside the scope, but in theory, they're doing the secure communication that would enable all that to happen. So at which layer, it's basically whatever, if you're running a little shop today, it's basically I guess at the transport layer, because it'd be the TLS enabled website that actually handles that information.
I have a question, or I actually have two questions. One is there a predefined URL that you have to set up, or in options do you just say where to send the data once it's all been collected from the user?
So there's no requirement, but obviously again, you'll need to have some kind of relationship with somebody to actually do the payment processing. Just getting hold of a credit card number or a token doesn't do anything. So you need to have some prearranged relationship with somebody to actually handle that, or to be able to do your payment processing for you. But there's definitely no URL. Were you asking as a merchant, or as if you wanted to set yourself up as a payment?
For the client side, on the client side, how does it? Does the client side specify where to send whatever information is collected?
No, all you get back, you get back the payment response, and the payment response is a JavaScript object.
Okay.
And then it's up to you to deserialize that object. So all it provides is you just call to JSON, and then magically you get back JSON out of it. So it's very cool because it just gives you back that, but then you need to deal with that in some way.
Okay, then the JavaScript has to decide what to do with it from that. So it's
Yeah.
not.
Yeah.
Okay.
So remember, these are very low level APIs, and they're really
Right.
they're really dumb. They don't do anything fancy.
Okay.
The examples that I have in the that I showed today in the presentation, I have a pull request to add them to the actual spec itself. So some of them are already there, but I'm adding more that show basically how to use the API. So hopefully those will land in the next few days.
And
Yep.
my other question was if it's a page that is on HTTPS but has like mixed content, like it's loading scripts or images over HTTP, will it still work, or will it give a user a warning, or is that
So the spec that like governs that is the secure context spec.
Okay.
So W3C has the spec called secure context, which is the one that hooks into. If there's a violation of the secure context, then the API will basically cease to work. It'll start throwing security errors. So if you try to construct a new payment request, it'll just say no. Or if you this other, it's basically if you have mixed context, and that mixed context is if the browser determines that the page is now insecure, it will get upset and start throwing.
Right. Cool.
So now that we are allowing browsers to store the card information, does that mean even all the browsers would need to be PCI compliant and everything?
That's a great question. We don't know yet, to be honest. I don't think so, and we've been trying to avoid it. So let me give you an idea here. So imagine, PCI compliance is, for people who don't know, is a compliance framework provided by the credit card industry that basically has a bunch of data protection rules. So it's don't store the CCV number anywhere. So there's limits on how long you can hold information for, what information you can actually hold, and so on. Because obviously, if somebody goes and steals the credit card numbers, then it's very easy to commit credit card fraud. So PCI compliance is basically you basically try to safeguard around that by putting kind of compliance requirements. I don't know if they're legal or not, but it just puts these compliance requirements. So having said that, so browsers have managed to, even though all this commerce takes place, browsers have managed not to require PCI compliance for ourselves, even though iframes and things like that enable all these transactions to happen. Now, we're again, as I showed you, I don't know if you'll remember one of the slides, we had you have to enter your CCV number. We never store the CCV number, so that's part of PCI compliance. So we will be, in theory, we will be complying with these guidelines, but without going through the certification process. We may end up going through the certification process, but basically we provide more security. As far as I know, because I work with people who are certified, browsers provide more security than most merchants do. So whether we will actually go and get the PCI or compliance, I'm not sure yet.
Right, thanks.
But I know we're more secure.
I have a question.
It's a hard problem though.
So, as I think in your slides you showed the process, being a user, the process of purchasing something would basically be a 2-tap or 2-click process, right? So,
Yep.
I mean, as looking at it from a user perspective, that sounds pretty great, but it also sounds pretty terrifying because, I don't know how many times you've accidentally clicked something on your phone, or you drop your phone on your face, or you misclick on a computer. Would there be anything in place to, say, do you really want to purchase this? Because then you could accidentally end up purchasing things, and that would really, really piss you off, depending on how large that purchase is.
Yeah.
There are some ethical concerns
so
there
again,
with
but
your
that
users.
really comes down to quality of implementation. So again, it's the UX affordances, and that's where you'll see browsers differentiate. So that's basically what we're going to compete on. So which one provides a nicer buying experience and the more secure one, and the one that doesn't allow you to make mistakes. So that's really what you'll see. But what you saw, for instance, with the Apple Pay example is you actually need to go to your watch and actually tap on things to approve it, or the same, you need to actually put your finger on the fingerprint thing. So things like that are again the thing that we're going to compete on. So you'll see some pretty innovative experiences being created there by various browser teams.
Right.
And we're hopeful that by providing those great experiences, people will come and use one browser. They'll prefer shopping in one browser than in another browser. Because like, oh, Firefox really has a nice way of, managing, or it has all my addresses, and it provides a really nice shopping experience. So yeah.
Thank you.
But yeah, we're most absolutely thinking about that, and how to make that, like, mitigate these problems. But also at the same time, like, ultimately having that dream where you can do the one click as well.
It's great until your phone's around a 6-year-old.
That's right. That's right. So, but hopefully, like, we'll get enough, like, biometric, I don't know. Like, eventually, who knows? Like, eventually, like, phones might actually, like, this whole thing might become, like, biometric sensitive. So, like, your thumbprint or you're actually, like, touching might always detect that it's actually you doing the touching instead of, like, your 6-year-old. So, if it's me touching the screen, then, yeah, authorize the So, there's, like, a whole bunch of, like, interesting, like, future technology that will come into play there.
Anybody else? No? I don't know. I had a couple of just like more boring questions about the code examples. The details object, is it like how much is that specified? Like you had numbers as strings, is that because of floating point or?
Yeah, so that's because of floating point. So funny story there. I'm also writing the tests. 2 funny stories. So one was I'm writing like the web platform tests that go together with the specification. And for people who don't know what those are, essentially when we write a specification, how we verify that like 2 browsers can work together, or 2 or more browsers work together, is we write a really large test suite that tests all the features. And what we also do at the same time is we test the security aspects or the security properties of these implementations. So we could say, for instance, like, can you make a $1 purchase of a thing? And that's all like pretty simple, right? But what if we suddenly say like, can I make a squillion, trillion, squillion, super dillion purchase for something for like a number that is like 100 megabytes in size? What happens then? So like, fun times, it started crashing, browsers started crashing when you're sending like these large numbers across. And like, what if you have like numbers that are like $1 and 100 zeros and then a cent? Things like that. That a lot of browser engineers hadn't thought about. So basically like Chrome crashed, Firefox crashed. There's a funny bug in with relation to details and the way that's modeled. Not so much around the numbers, but like right now in GitHub you can actually see this. I managed to craft a test that in Microsoft Edge, will display an empty payment sheet with nothing in it, which is like, what? So there's just really amusing things you can like basically send to browsers. So yeah, so with regards to the numbers, Firefox and Chrome were treating numbers differently, which is a little bit scary. So we just the folks that were implementing on the Mozilla side, they misread the specification and they were allowing things like, yeah, I can totally buy something for like 0.5 of a cent, which kind of makes sense. You could say like, that thing costs 0.5 of a cent. Yeah, why not? But that's not allowed by the spec. The spec says like, if you want to buy something for like 0.5 cents, you need to like say like 0.05. So there's like very specific rules that we weren't following, which we've now fixed. So yes, the idea is that, so you don't get into these like floating point rounding problems, because JavaScript will like has limits on the number of like the size of numbers. So you can get around those problems by basically just using strings. Sorry, Ryan, that was like, I know that was your boring question, but it's actually quite an interesting question because it has all these like funny pitfalls.
Also, like, I think it was the event object in one of your examples, it looked like there's a method called update with.
Yes. So update with was so update with basically allows you, like, once you get like a shipping address change, like if you change shipping address, you can basically update the payment request. So remember the fridge example where I wanted to ship a fridge to Australia. So that's not allowed, or if it is allowed, it's actually going to cost you like, okay, you want that fridge, it's going to cost you like $1,000. So update with allows you to model that, so you can basically like re-provide the data that you need to actually like update the payment request to actually say like, well, shipping's actually changed, you actually need to pay a lot more shipping, and that also updates the total. What's interesting there, and what has caught me out before, is that the payment sheet that we display in the browser doesn't actually keep state. It's really like dumb. It just like says like, these were the options that were given to me at this moment in time. And then if you call update with, the developer needs to provide all the information again. It's not just like that you're doing a delta between one thing and another. Basically, you're like replacing the whole sheet again. So it's like, here's the new total. Here's again all the shipping options, including the new one that's changed. And here's all the items again that were included in the original one. And then it's up to us, like within the browser, to work out, okay, here's what's actually changed, and here's what we need to actually show. So yeah, it's update with it basically allows you to basically model that problem, or to deal with that problem where things change. And you need to basically modify. So the way to view update with is basically as a dialogue between the merchant and the end user through the payment sheet. Does that answer your question?
It does, yeah. Thanks. I
Okay, cool.
hadn't seen it before. Any other questions?
I have a question about the more experimental handing the payment off to like a third-party app or progressive web app. Do you think there will be a spec for what information gets handed to the third-party app? Because like, you could imagine a third-party app that's maybe is slightly evil and logs all of the things you buy in your cart.
Yeah. So we definitely will not pass along the details. So at least so this display items, at least Firefox will never pass those along. Those will always stay in the browser. So they should never leave the browser. Now I know in the news recently, like Google got in trouble because they were actually like collecting all the like display items, not from the API itself, but like through Android Pay. I think they were doing that. There was like a recent like news article about that. Anyway, we're really aware of that, and I think everybody. I mean, obviously, like we work with credit card companies as well in the working group. So like Visa, MasterCard, Amex, they're all there, and they're all very much aware of like these things. So they obviously also know like how important it is, and they're also guiding us in not making privacy mistakes as well. So turns out like these credit card people, they're not bad people. They're quite good people. So yeah, so like we are well aware, and as you know, like both and all browsers, and we're all really concerned with user privacy. It's not like just Mozilla. So like Mozilla, we try to represent the user's interests as much as possible, and we try to protect user privacy as much as possible. But we're all doing it across all the browsers. We're all really concerned about it, and we make sure that we don't leak information. Particularly, like you said, with integration with third party, evil apps, so they won't get bad information. Having said that, we can't we can only do so much. So if you do make the choice of actually like installing an evil app and you don't know, there's not much we can do to like prevent that from happening. That has to like basically bubble up to the Play Store to pull that out, or if Apple eventually supports us, it would be up to them to actually like pull the evil app from the App Store.
Right.
Good. You have another one?
Yeah, there's one last. I probably should be the last one.
Okay.
But this came from someone that watched the entire stream, so I want to give them
Okay, yeah,
some
sure.
kudos. How does one get a job working on payments programming? What kind of skills do they need?
So I think as I mentioned, like obviously like just general web development and form development skills are critical. So understanding like how do I put together a payment form, and then understanding just general like e-commerce stuff, like how do payment gateways work, and like how do credit cards get processed, and looking into the future, how does Bitcoin work? So having an understanding of that, of the technologies that go into play there. And then also like there's the UX side. It's like, okay, what provides a great shopping experience? Like what makes Amazon work so well as a shopping experience? What makes like Etsy work so well as a shopping experience? Or even like Airbnb? Like apart from like, what is it about that experience that makes for an interesting experience and makes it easy to use that, and what could be improved there? So understanding those bits and how all that comes together to create commerce is critical to like, if you want to get a job like designing these kinds of experiences. And then also again, like understanding how the API itself or what it enables. So like how you can do this one-click shopping experiences versus like, okay, here's a shopping cart. Which one is the right experience for what people want to do? Like, like for instance, if it's like a movie website, like optimizing that, like, okay, I'm going with my friends, so I want to like, get a nice listing of the shows or the movies that are showing. Quickly being able to like select like, okay, I want 2 tickets, and just like boom, just clicking and just like saying, okay, I want to buy for this particular session. So optimizing these kind of payment flows for the things that people want to do, and then like providing them like, here's the ticket on your phone, so you don't need to go and freaking pick it up from somewhere, or like, it's just basically like being human and understanding how humans want to get things done, and optimizing for those, and leveraging the browser or leveraging like the API as much as possible. And where that doesn't work, like if the API is not available, like falling back to Apple Pay, or falling back to just using a form, like falling back to the common experience. So basically understanding how forms, how the API works. It's this whole past, present, and future thing that I talked about. That's basically like, if you want to get a job like doing this kind of stuff, that's basically the things you need to look at. But it's not that hard. Like personally, I knew nothing about payments. Like I've only been doing this for like 7 months, and I knew literally nothing about payments. I bought stuff online a couple of times, That's all I knew about it. And then it's like, oh my God, what is all this payment stuff? What is this Bitcoin stuff? And then you just read a couple of books, and it's like, oh yeah, okay, that all makes sense. Yeah, learning to learn is the ultimate skill at the end of the day. It's like learning how to learn, and learning quickly is like, I guess career advice is the only one I can give.
Alright, all good?
Yeah.
Alright. Hey, I want to say thanks to Marcos, especially just coming over, getting over the flu.
Yeah.
He's up early, I don't know if you know this, but he's in Australia, so he was up early to do this, and thanks a lot.
Yeah.
Really appreciate
Hey,
it.
no problem. Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, great questions. Thanks, everyone. That was great. Hopefully it was useful. If you have any feedback, I'd love to hear it. Like if the slide, like this, like technical stuff, like if the slides, like the text was too small or anything like that, or if the code was too complicated, please give me that feedback, because I need to do this presentation a bunch of times. So any feedback we have, doesn't matter how critical, or like if it was boring in some parts or anything, just like, like I said, I've never done this talk before. I literally just like put the slides together last night, but I didn't like rehearse it or anything. So like, I'm really just looking for like any feedback you have.
Sure. All right.
And you can even give it to Brian if you don't want to like write to me. Brian can pass it on to me. So it's all good.
Thanks. I think he's gonna switch off the screen. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I gotta head off to work. All right, cheers. Have a nice evening. All right,
Have a nice
thanks
day.
again. Bye-bye.